Hello, welcome to a new series on this wonderful world of the internet. This is a new series for the GCSE PE specification grades 9 to 1. My name's Nash and I'll be helping you revise for this qualification. And in this episode we are looking at the paper 1 movement analysis, which has three different subtopics to it. We'll look at axes of rotation, planes of movement, and level systems. We'll be looking at level systems first, so let's go. So in this segment, we are going to be looking at three classes of lever in the lever system. But first we need to know what a lever system is. A lever system is the coordination of bones and muscles to create movement. In the system, there are three key terms you need to know, as you may be asked to name or draw it. One of them is the fulcrum. This is a joint in the body that helps the body to do the movement. Then there is the effort, which is the muscular force given by the muscle. Lastly, there is the load, which is either the weight of a body part or an object. To draw them, you need to know what the symbols are. So for the fulcrum, it's a triangle. For the load, is a box and then an arrow pointing downwards, and then there's the effort, which is two arrows going in the opposite directions. As you know, there are three different lever systems, and a great way to remember them is FLE 1, 2, 3. This helps you remember which of them goes in the middle, as you can write FLE on one row and then below that 1, 2, 3. This will then remind you just know that the fulcrum will go in the middle in the first class lever system, and then in the second class the load goes in the middle, and then the effort goes in the middle for the third class lever system. For the first class lever system, the fulcrum is in the middle with load and effort on the side. A good practical example of a first class lever is when a footballer is heading the ball. This is because when heading the football, the load is the ball, the neck joint is the fulcrum, and the trapezius is the effort, which results in the footballer heading the ball. For the second class lever, the effort and the load are pushing against each other, so they are working together. This happens because the load is in the middle of the fulcrum and the effort. A good practical example of a second class lever is standing on your tiptoes when reaching for a smash in badminton, or when preparing for a diving. This happens as the heel of the body is the fulcrum that helps the load and the effort to do the movement. The person's body weight is the load, and the gastrocnemius is the effort. Last but not least is the third class lever. This is when the effort is in between the fulcrum and the load. A good practical example of a third class lever is a bicep curl. This happens as the bicep muscle is the effort, whereas the weight is the load, and then the fulcrum is the elbow. This is the subtopic of level system, which you'll need to know practical examples, as they may ask you for that in the exam. And next we'll look at the planes of movement. The next subtopic we'll be looking at is the planes of movement, and there are three different planes that you will need to know, and they are the frontal plane, sagittal plane, and the transverse plane. First we'll be looking at the frontal plane. The frontal plane divides the body into two, which is the front and back. This allows the movement of the abduction and adduction. This is basically where a joint is moved either away or towards the midline of the body. A good practical example of this is a breaststroke in swimming, or jumping jacks, also known as star jumps. Then we have the sagittal plane, which divides the body into right and left. And a good this allows the movement of flexion and extension. And a practical example of this is the leg action in running. Then we have the transverse plane. This divides the body to the upper and lower part of it. This allows the movement of the rotational movement of the body. A good example of this is bowling and cricket. And the last subtopic we'll be looking at is the axes of rotation. And again, all of these have 3 different types of the subtopics to remember. Now we look at the axes of rotation, which is the last and third subtopic in the bigger topic of movement analysis. And in this one there are 3 different axes that you need to know. First, they are frontal axis, transverse axis, and the longitudinal axis. And I will give the practical example of this and how it works. So for the frontal axis, it runs horizontal from the front of the body to the back, and it's a diagonal line through the body, with the center being in the stomach most likely. And then this helps a person do a cartwheel, as it lets them use that center to go around and perform it. And then we have the transverse axis, which is horizontally left to right, and this allows a person to do a somersault. And then for the longitudinal axis, this is vertically from the top to bottom. So a practical example for this is a pirouette in gymnastics or dance. So the dancer is twisting around the axis. These are 3 axes that you need to know. And transverse has come up in planes of movement and axes of rotation. You need to know the difference between them and how to not get confused, because I get confused with them myself.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.